Imagine being born with everything, and then being stuck with nothing, and then having to claim everything back all by yourself. You'd have to be a pretty amazing guy. One would even say you'd have to be great. That is exactly what Alexander the Great was, and how he became the man that we all know him as through history. Alexander the Great was born in the Pella region of Macedonia on July 20th, 356 BC. He was born to King Philip II and to Queen Olympia. Alexander almost never saw his father that much because he spent most of his time with military campaigns and internal affairs. And it was because of this that Alexander slowly grew over the years to hate his father. And his father knew, though, that this boy must grow up to become the new king. So instead of teaching Alexander everything he would ever need to know to be a king, like how a good father would, he instead hired two professors to do it for him. These two professors had some pretty famous names, even nowadays. Their names were Leonidas and Aristotle. They taught Alexander everything he would ever need to know to be both a king and a warrior. They taught him political intrigue, sociology, what at the time was considered world history, and they also taught him martial arts, how to use a bow, and of course, swordsmanship. And it was thanks to these lessons that, as a mere teenager, Alexander was able to join his father on the front lines of battle and try and unite the Thracian tribes and the Greek states under his father's rule. And it was thanks to the two of them that they were able to do just that. And his father, after years of conquering, called this great unification of states and tribes the Corinthian League. However, it was after this great conquering that their work together fell to an end, and that Alexander began to hate his father more than any other, because his father, King Philip II, remarried and cast his old wife and Alexander out, and Alexander and his mother Olympia were forced to spend time with the kingdom on his mother's side of the family. And this went on until 336 BC, when King Philip II was killed by a Macedonian noble who sought the power of the king for himself, but ended up killed for committing the crime of murdering the king. Now, with his father finally dead and gone, a more than eager 19-year-old Alexander was sent on a quest to reclaim the throne for himself and his mother by any means necessary. And once they had heard this, the great army that once was his father's quickly decided to join him. Because, how could they not after they had fought alongside him during the Battle of Corona? With these armies by his side, Alexander quickly and rather easily became king, and his first royal decree was to kill any other bastard child that King Philip II had, making him the sole heir to the throne. Now, just because he was the new king did not mean that this Corinthian League would just bow their heads and bend their knees to him. In fact, after King Philip II's death, many of them had already decided to separate again. And it was then that Alexander the Great knew that he had to continue what his father had done. He had to go and reunite all the Greek states and the tribes all over again. And the first one he started with was Thessaly. This one was the easiest because all he had to do was use his silver tongue, which his tutors had also taught him. No actual violence, just simple political diplomacy was all it took to convince them. Then was Thermopylae, and that one did require some conquering. After that was the Thracian tribe again, and he had conquered every single state except two, Thebes and Sparta. Now, Alexander the Great knew better than to mess with Sparta, so he decided to leave them all enough alone. But this means that his only target was Thebes. Wasting no time, Alexander marched with his 33,000 soldiers to Thebes. And they had arrived so quickly that the citizens of Thebes didn't even have time to prepare. They were quickly decimated by Alexander and his men, and this would go down in history as the Great Massacre of Thebes. Once this was done, Alexander made sure that all the other Greek states, including Sparta, knew about the massacre. And he used this as a warning to all the Greek states, including Sparta, that this is what would happen if they would revolt. And to Sparta, the message was a bit different. It was, if you mess with us, if you try and mess with the Corinthian League, this is what's going to happen to you. Now, over the years, you would think that after he conquered the Corinthian League and re-established it under his order, that he would stop there. But Alexander had his sights a bit bigger than what his father did. He wanted to see the whole world in the palm of his hand. And unlike most people who dream that, Alexander made his dream a reality. It was thanks to the might of his generals and his strategies that he was able to conquer a plethora of kings and countries, such as Egypt, which was the first and the easiest, because his mother, who was devoted to him in every aspect of the word, slaughtered Cleopatra's only child, driving her to suicide. Then was Iran, and then Persia. Now Persia was the hardest because of King Darius III, who had proven a tactician equal to Alexander, but after catching him off guard at the riverside, held him prisoner, to which they quickly surrendered. But it was also in Persia where Alexander met Roxana, a woman whom he fell in love with and named his wife and to be the future queen of the world. And finally, he conquered India and even the southern borders of Asia. After this, he became what is known as King of Babylon, Asia, and the king of the four quarters of the world. However, he was not able to see this dream come true. He died of what is now known as malaria in Babylon of June 13th, 323 BC. And it was 3 days before Roxana gave birth to their firstborn son.